The dry Nevada sun beat mercilessly upon Xander McCoy's weathered skin as he hammered another railroad spike into the unyielding earth, his throat raw from shouting orders over the clamor of construction. It was 1869, and the Central Pacific Railroad's push eastward through Winnemucca had become his life's mission and possibly his death sentence. Blood and sweat mingled on his palms as he swung the hammer again, the sound echoing across the barren landscape. The other men had retired to their tents hours ago, but Xander remained, determined to meet the impossible deadline that Superintendent Crocker had set. The company's future and his own reputation depended on laying another mile of track before the week's end. "Keep going," he rasped to himself, his voice barely audible now, reduced to a painful whisper after 14 hours of shouting directions. "Just keep going." The distant clip-clop of hooves barely registered in his exhausted mind. The sun was beginning its descent behind the Ruby Mountains, casting long shadows across the partially completed track. He didn't notice the approaching wagon until it came to a stop several yards away. "You'll work yourself to death at this rate," called a female voice, clear as a bell in the evening air. Xander straightened his aching back and turned to see a young woman perched on a wagon seat, reins loosely held in her gloved hands. Her honey-colored hair was swept beneath a practical bonnet, and her eyes, a startling shade of blue, regarded him with equal parts concern and amusement. "Miss," he acknowledged with a nod, his voice cracking painfully. He cleared his throat and winced. The woman climbed down from the wagon with practiced ease, her simple calico dress swishing around sturdy boots. She reached into the back of the wagon and produced a canteen. "I'm Hope Prescott," she said, approaching him without hesitation. "My father owns the general store in town." She extended the canteen. "You sound like you could use this." Xander stared at the offering, pride warring with desperate thirst. The latter won out. He took the canteen with a grateful nod and drank deeply, the cool water soothing his ravaged throat. "Thank you, Miss Prescott." "Xander McCoy, railroad foreman," he managed, his voice still rough but stronger. Hope glanced at the abandoned tools scattered around and the lone figure working as twilight approached. "Where is your crew, Mr. McCoy?" "Gone for the day. We're behind schedule." He gestured vaguely toward the unfinished section of track. "I thought I could make up some ground before dark." She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable, then she rolled up her sleeves. "You don't have to do it alone, you know." Xander blinked, certain he had misheard her. "Pardon me?" Hope was already moving toward the wagon. "I've helped my father unload supply crates since I was 12. I'm stronger than I look." She returned with a pair of work gloves that seemed comically large for her delicate hands. "Show me what to do." "Miss Prescott, I couldn't possibly hope," she corrected. "And you can, Mr. McCoy. The sun will be down soon, and you'll accomplish nothing if you collapse from exhaustion." She nodded toward the railroad ties. "Now, shall we?" Too stunned to argue, Xander found himself instructing the merchant's daughter on how to position the wooden ties while he hammered the spikes. To his amazement, she worked efficiently, without complaint, despite the dust that soon covered her dress and face. As darkness fell, they had laid another 20 yards of track, not the progress he'd hoped for, but more than he would have managed alone. Hope straightened her back and wiped her brow, leaving a smudge of dirt across her forehead. "Tomorrow," she said matter-of-factly, "I'll bring more water. And perhaps something to eat." "Miss Prescott, Hope, I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask, Mr. McCoy. I offered." She removed the borrowed gloves and handed them back to him. "My father always says a community either stands together or falls apart. The railroad means everything to Winnemucca's future." Xander studied her face in the fading light. "Why would you help a stranger?" Hope's smile was genuine, reaching all the way to her eyes. "Because no one should have to carry their burdens alone." She climbed back onto her wagon. "Besides, you won't be a stranger after tomorrow, will you?" As she turned the wagon around and headed back toward town, Xander stood watching until she disappeared into the gathering darkness. For the first time since taking on this impossible job, he felt something lighten in his chest. It wasn't just the physical help she'd provided, it was her words. You don't have to do it alone. 4 simple words that somehow changed everything. The next morning, Xander's crew arrived to find him already at work, his spirits inexplicably lifted despite the mountain of tasks ahead. He didn't mention Hope's help from the previous evening, half convinced he had imagined the entire encounter in his exhaustion. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, a familiar wagon appeared on the horizon, and the men turned to look as Hope Prescott approached. This time, she had brought not just water but several baskets covered with cloth. "Gentlemen," she called out cheerfully as she drew near, "I thought you might appreciate some refreshment." The workers exchanged curious glances, but were quick to gather around as she unveiled loaves of fresh bread, cheese, dried meat, and jars of lemonade. Xander stood back, watching as she distributed the food with easy efficiency, learning each man's name as she went. When she finally approached him, her eyes sparkled with amusement. "You look surprised, Mr. McCoy. Did you think I wouldn't come?" "I wasn't certain," he admitted, accepting the bread and cheese she offered. "This is very generous of you." "Not at all. Father says the railroad men are good for business." She lowered her voice. "Though that's not why I'm here." Their eyes met briefly, and Xander felt an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the Nevada sun. "Why are you here, then?" Hope didn't answer directly. Instead, she glanced at the work in progress. "You've made good progress this morning." "We have," he agreed, "but we're still behind schedule. The company expects the track to reach the junction by month's end." Hope studied the distant landscape. "Is that even possible?" "Probably not," he admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "But I have to try." She nodded thoughtfully. "Then we'll all have to try together, won't we?" Before he could respond, she turned to address the crew. "I'll be back tomorrow, same time, and I've spoken with some of the women in town. They'll be sending food as well." The men cheered, and Xander watched in amazement as his normally cynical crew seemed transformed by this simple act of kindness. When they returned to work after the brief meal, there was a new energy in their movements. As Hope prepared to leave, Xander approached her wagon. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for the food, but for—" He gestured vaguely, unable to articulate what her presence had meant. She seemed to understand nonetheless. "Sometimes all people need is to know someone believes they can succeed." She gathered the reins. "Until tomorrow, Mr. McCoy." "Xander," he corrected impulsively. "Please call me Xander." Her smile brightened. "Until tomorrow, Xander." True to her word, Hope returned the following day and the day after that. Soon, her visits became a highlight that the entire crew looked forward to, and Xander found himself watching the horizon long before her scheduled appearance. A week into this new routine, disaster struck. A miscalculation in the grade of the land caused a section of newly laid track to buckle under the weight of a supply train. No one was injured, but the damage set them back several days of work. When Hope arrived that afternoon, she found the men demoralized and Xander in a state of barely controlled fury. "This is my fault," he told her grimly, leading her away from the others to inspect the damage. "I should have checked the calculations myself instead of trusting the company surveyor." Hope surveyed the twisted metal and splintered wood. "Can it be fixed?" "Yes, but it will take time we don't have." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Crocker will have my head for this. There's already talk of replacing me." Hope was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "What if you had more men?" Xander laughed bitterly. "The company won't approve additional workers. The budget is already strained." "I wasn't talking about the company." She turned to face him directly. "What if the people of Winnemucca helped? Many of the miners are between jobs right now. They're strong men who know how to work hard. Why would they help? This isn't their problem." "But it is," Hope insisted. "The railroad is the future of this town. If the line doesn't come through Winnemucca, we'll wither away like a dozen other settlements I could name." Xander shook his head. "I can't pay them." "Maybe you don't have to." Hope's eyes lit up with determination. Let me speak to my father and the town council. There might be another way. Before Xander could argue further, she was climbing back into her wagon. I'll return this evening, she called over her shoulder. Don't give up yet. True to her word, Hope returned as dusk was falling, but she wasn't alone. Behind her wagon came a procession of men and women from town shopkeepers, miners, farmers, even the local schoolteacher. They brought tools, lanterns, and wagons loaded with supplies. Samuel Prescott, Hope's father and a man Xander had met only briefly in town, approached with an extended hand. "Mr. McCoy," he greeted warmly. "My daughter tells me you could use some assistance." Xander stared in disbelief at the gathering crowd. "Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't ask your people to work for nothing," Samuel chuckled. "Who said anything about nothing? The town council has voted. Every man who helps with the railroad will receive credit at the businesses in town, food, supplies, even a few drinks at the saloon." He winked. "We're investing in our future, Mr. McCoy. All we ask is that you make sure that future includes Winnemucca." Overcome, Xander could only nod. Hope appeared at his side, her expression expectant. "Well, will you accept our help?" Looking into her hopeful face, Xander realized he'd been wrong all along. This wasn't just his burden to bear. "I would be honored," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. Hope's answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. What followed was unlike anything Xander had experienced in his years of railroad work. The people of Winnemucca threw themselves into the task with incredible determination. Men who had spent their lives mining or farming quickly adapted to the rigors of railroad construction. Women organized meals and brought supplies. Even the children helped, carrying water and running messages. Working alongside them, Xander saw the damaged section repaired in half the time he had estimated. As they moved forward with new track, the pace of construction nearly doubled. Every evening, the work continued by lantern light, with shifts of townspeople relieving his regular crew. Through it all, Hope was a constant presence, coordinating the town's efforts, ensuring supplies flowed steadily, and somehow always finding time to bring Xander water when his voice grew hoarse from shouting instructions over the din of construction. One evening, as they sat on a stack of railroad ties watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Hope asked the question Xander had been dreading. "What happens when the railroad is complete? Will you move on to the next section?" Xander stared at the horizon, considering his answer carefully. In the weeks since Hope had first appeared with her canteen of water, something had shifted inside him. The drive to succeed, to prove himself to the company, had gradually been replaced by a different motivation entirely. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Before Winnemucca, the next job was all I ever thought about. Building the railroad was everything. And now," her voice was soft, tentative in a way he rarely heard from her. Xander turned to look at her, taking in the golden light on her face, the wisps of honey-colored hair escaping her bonnet. "Now I'm not so sure." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Winnemucca might not be much compared to San Francisco or Sacramento, but it has its charms." "It certainly does," he agreed, not looking at the town but at her. Hope blushed under his gaze and quickly changed the subject. "Father says the supply train is due tomorrow with the materials you requested. That's good news." Xander allowed the moment to pass, aware of an unspoken understanding growing between them. "With the extra help, we might actually meet the deadline." "You will," Hope said with confidence. "I've never seen anyone work as hard as you do, Xander McCoy." Something in her tone made him bold. "I've had inspiration," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Xander thought he might lean forward and close the distance between them. But a shout from the work site broke the spell, calling him back to his responsibilities. As they walked back to join the others, Hope's hand brushed against his briefly. It might have been accidental, but the gentle pressure of her fingers suggested otherwise. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. With the combined efforts of his crew and the townspeople, the railroad steadily advanced eastward. Crocker himself arrived to inspect the progress, and was so impressed by what he found that he authorized additional funds for the project. "You've done the impossible here, McCoy," the superintendent told him, surveying the bustling work site. "I've half a mind to put you in charge of the entire Nevada section." It should have been exactly what Xander wanted to hear: recognition, advancement, the promise of greater responsibility. Instead, he found himself strangely conflicted. That evening, as the celebration of Crocker's visit continued in town, Xander sought out Hope. He found her on the porch of her father's store, away from the revelry. "There you are," she said, smiling as he approached. "The man of the hour should be enjoying his triumph." "It isn't just my triumph," he reminded her, taking a seat beside her on the wooden bench. "None of this would have happened without you." Hope shook her head modestly. "I only brought water and rallied a few neighbors." "You did much more than that." Xander gathered his courage. "Hope, I need to tell you something." Her expression grew serious. "Is it about Mr. Crocker's offer? Father mentioned he might give you a promotion." "Yes." Xander took a deep breath. "He wants me to oversee construction all the way to Salt Lake City. It would mean leaving Winnemucca within the month." Hope's face fell, though she quickly tried to mask her disappointment. "That's wonderful news," she said, her voice not quite steady. "You deserve the recognition." "I haven't accepted yet," Xander said quickly. Hope looked up, surprise and something else, something that made his heart race, visible in her eyes. "Why not? It's a tremendous opportunity." Xander chose his words carefully. "I've been thinking about what happens when the railroad is finished. About what I want next." "And what do you want, Xander?" The directness of her question caught him off guard, but he found he had an equally direct answer. "I want to stay in Winnemucca. I want to build something here." He hesitated, then added softly, "With you if you'll have me." Hope's breath caught audibly. "Xander, are you saying—" "I'm saying that somewhere between you bringing water to a stubborn, exhausted foreman and now, I fell in love with you, Hope Prescott." The words, once spoken, seemed to release something tight and wound inside him. "I don't want advancement or recognition if it means leaving you behind." Tears welled in Hope's eyes, but she was smiling. "I fell in love with you too," she whispered. "Watching you work until you could barely stand, never giving up even when it seemed impossible." Xander reached for her hand, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain she must hear it. "Then tell me to stay." "Stay," she said simply. "Stay in Winnemucca. We'll build something together that's more important than any railroad." He leaned forward then, closing the distance between them at last. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, and over far too quickly for Xander's liking. When they parted, Hope's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if she were memorizing the feeling. "I should speak to your father," Xander said, suddenly aware of proprieties. Hope laughed softly. "Father has been expecting this conversation for weeks. He keeps asking when you're going to stop hammering rails and start building a future." Xander grinned, relieved but also nervous. "And what did you tell him? That you would figure it out in your own time?" She squeezed his hand. "And you have." The next morning, Xander found Superintendent Crocker preparing to depart and requested a private word. "I'm honored by your offer, sir," he began carefully. "But I must respectfully decline." Crocker's bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Decline? McCoy, do you understand what you're turning down? This is the opportunity of a lifetime." "I understand, sir, but I've found something here in Winnemucca that matters more to me than advancement." Xander straightened his shoulders. "I'd like to stay on until this section is complete, if you'll allow it. After that, I plan to remain in town." The older man studied him thoughtfully. "This wouldn't have anything to do with Samuel Prescott's daughter, would it?" Xander couldn't help but smile. "It has everything to do with her, sir." To his surprise, Crocker laughed heartily. "Well, I can't say I blame you. She's a remarkable young woman." He clapped Xander on the shoulder. "You finish this section, McCoy. Do it right. After that, your life is your own." "Thank you, sir." As Crocker's carriage pulled away, Xander felt a profound sense of rightness about his decision. He had come to Winnemucca focused solely on building a railroad. Now he understood he was building a life. The weeks that followed were the happiest Xander had known. During the day, he threw himself into completing the railroad, knowing every spike driven brought him closer to his future with Hope. In the evenings, they would walk together through town, planning and dreaming. Samuel Prescott, after a brief but intimidating conversation about his daughter's happiness, gave his blessing to their courtship. "She's got a mind of her own," the merchant warned Xander. "Always has. You'll never win an argument with her, so best get used to that now." "I wouldn't want it any other way, sir," Xander had replied honestly. As summer faded into autumn, the railroad neared completion. The deadline that had once seemed impossible was now within reach, largely thanks to the continued support of the townspeople. On the day the final spike was to be driven, it seemed all of Winnemucca turned out to witness the historic moment. Xander, standing before the gathered crowd with hammer in hand, spotted Hope in the front row. She wore her best dress, a blue calico that matched her eyes, and when their gazes met, he felt the same jolt of connection that had first sparked between them months ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, his voice strong and clear. "Today marks not just the completion of a section of track, but the beginning of a new era for Winnemucca. This railroad will bring people, commerce, and opportunity to our town." He emphasized the word "our," watching Hope's smile widen in response. "None of this would have been possible without the extraordinary efforts of the people of Winnemucca. You proved that when we work together, nothing is impossible." He raised the hammer. This final spike represents that unity and determination. With a powerful swing, Xander drove the spike home and a cheer erupted from the crowd. As the celebration began in earnest, he made his way through the throng to Hope's side. "Well done, Mr. McCoy," she said formally, though her eyes danced with private joy. "I had excellent help, Miss Prescott," he replied in the same tone. Then, lowering his voice, he added, "Walk with me. There's something I need to ask you." Hope nodded, and they slipped away from the celebration, following the newly laid tracks a short distance out of town. When they reached a bend that offered privacy, Xander took both her hands in his. "Hope," he began, his heart racing, "these past months have shown me what truly matters in life. It isn't titles or recognition or even accomplishments like building a railroad. It's having someone to share your burdens and your joys." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I love you, Hope Prescott. I want to build a life with you right here in Winnemucca. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant gold ring set with a small diamond modest by some standards, but it had cost him nearly all his savings. Hope's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the ring to his face. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, Xander, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then pulled her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Their wedding took place as the first snow dusted the mountains surrounding Winnemucca. The entire town attended, filling the small church to capacity and spilling out into the street. Hope, radiant in a cream-colored gown her mother had altered from her own wedding dress, walked down the aisle on her father's arm to where Xander waited, hardly able to believe his good fortune. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Xander felt as though his heart might burst with happiness. When they exchanged their vows, Xander's voice was strong and unwavering. He had practiced for days to ensure he wouldn't falter at this crucial moment. "I, Xander McCoy, take thee, Hope Prescott, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Hope's voice was equally clear as she repeated the words, her eyes never leaving his. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss the bride." As their lips met, sealing their commitment to one another, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration afterward was the grandest Winnemucca had seen, with tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by every family in town. There was music and dancing well into the night, with Xander surprising everyone, including his bride, with his unexpected skill on the dance floor. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" Hope asked breathlessly as he twirled her through a lively reel. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he admitted with a grin. "Said we'd need it one day when we found the right woman. She was right." Later, as the celebration continued around them, Samuel Prescott pulled Xander aside for a private word. "I have a proposition for you, son," he said, his tone serious despite the festive atmosphere. "I'm not getting any younger, and this store is becoming more than I can manage alone, especially with the growth the railroad has brought to town." Xander nodded, sensing where this was heading. "I'd like you to consider becoming my partner in the business," Samuel continued. "Eventually, it would pass to you and Hope. The town needs good, solid merchants who understand what the people need." Touched by the offer and the trust it represented, Xander extended his hand. "I would be honored, sir." Samuel clasped his hand firmly. "Good. We'll work out the details after you and Hope return from your honeymoon." He winked. "You have other matters to attend to first." When Xander returned to Hope's side and shared the news, her joy was boundless. "Oh, Xander, it's perfect. Father has been hoping you would agree. He respects you enormously, you know." "The feeling is mutual," Xander assured her. "And the idea of building a business with you, of being part of this community for years to come, it feels right, Hope." She leaned up to kiss him, unconcerned about the many eyes watching. "It is right. Everything about us is right." Their honeymoon was a 2-week journey to San Francisco, courtesy of the very railroad Xander had helped build. The city's grandeur and bustle were exciting after the relative quiet of Winnemucca, but both found themselves eager to return home by the end of their stay. "Strange to think that just a few months ago I would have considered this my natural environment," Xander remarked as they boarded the train for the return journey. "Now it feels overwhelming." Hope tucked her arm through his. "Home is where we make it, not where we were born or where we started." "And we've made ours in Winnemucca," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. Their return to town marked the beginning of their new life together. They moved into a small house near the Prescott General Store, and Xander threw himself into learning the mercantile business with the same determination he had once applied to building railroads. To his surprise, he found the work deeply satisfying. Where once he had measured progress in miles of track laid, he now gauged success by the relationships built with customers and suppliers, by the growth of the business, and by the warm home he returned to each evening. Hope proved to be not just a loving wife but an astute business partner. Her understanding of the townspeople's needs and her flair for display transformed the store's inventory and appearance. Under the combined guidance of Samuel, Xander, and Hope, Prescott General Store flourished as Winnemucca grew around it. Their first Christmas as a married couple was a time of special joy. They decorated their home with pine boughs and candles, and Hope surprised Xander with a meticulously crafted model of a locomotive engine she had ordered from back east months earlier. "To remember where we began," she explained as he admired the intricate details. His gift to her was a delicate gold locket containing a small daguerreotype of the two of them taken on their wedding day. "To carry our beginning with you always," he said as he fastened it around her neck. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Hope shared news that made their happiness complete. "Xander," she whispered, guiding his hand to rest on her still flat stomach, "we're going to have a baby." His breath caught in his throat. "A baby, are you certain, doctor?" "Whitman confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Her voice trembled with emotion. "We'll be parents by summer." Xander gathered her close, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was telling him. "A family," he murmured against her hair. "Our family." The months that followed were filled with preparations and planning. Xander threw himself into creating a nursery, crafting a cradle and a rocking chair with his own hands during the evenings after the store closed. Hope's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat of Nevada made the final weeks uncomfortable. She continued to work in the store until Samuel and Xander insisted she rest, concerned by the increasing fatigue that shadowed her eyes. "The baby will be here soon enough," Samuel reminded his daughter gently. "The store managed before you, and it will manage now." On a scorching day in late July 1870, Hope went into labor. Xander paced outside their bedroom as the midwife and Hope's mother attended to her, each cry of pain tearing at his heart. After what seemed an eternity, a new sound broke the tension, the indignant wail of a newborn. The midwife emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. McCoy." "A fine, healthy boy." Xander entered the bedroom with reverence, finding Hope propped up against the pillows, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. In her arms lay a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she invited, her voice tender. Xander approached the bed and carefully sat beside her. When she placed the infant in his arms, he felt a surge of love so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. "He's perfect," he whispered, studying the tiny features, the bow-shaped mouth, the tuft of dark hair, the miniature fingers curled into a fist. "What shall we name him?" Hope asked, watching the two most important people in her world with contentment. Xander considered for a moment. "What about Samuel, after your father?" Hope's eyes brightened. "Samuel William McCoy," she suggested, adding Xander's father's name. "It's perfect," he agreed, carefully returning their son to her arms. "Just like him, just like you." Young Samuel thrived, growing stronger and more curious with each passing day. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's bright blue eyes, a combination that charmed everyone he met. The store became his second home, with a special corner set aside where he could play while his parents worked. As Winnemucca continued to expand, so did the Prescott-McCoy business ventures. With the profits from the general store, Xander and Samuel S.R. invested in a small lumber mill to serve the growing construction needs of the town. Hope, meanwhile, expanded the store's inventory to include more luxuries that the increasingly prosperous citizens could now afford. When Samuel was 3, the family welcomed a daughter they named Elizabeth Grace. Unlike her brother's easy entry into the world, Elizabeth's birth was difficult, leaving Hope weakened and bedridden for several weeks afterward. During this time, Xander revealed a gentle, nurturing side that surprised even himself. He managed the store, cared for young Samuel, and tended to both Hope and the newborn with unwavering devotion. "You're a natural father," Hope observed one evening as he rocked Elizabeth to sleep while simultaneously telling Samuel a bedtime story. "I had excellent teachers," Xander replied, smiling at her. "My parents and you." As Hope regained her strength, life settled into a new rhythm. The children brought a joy to their lives that neither had anticipated, even in their happiest dreams of family. When the children were old enough for school, Hope returned to more active involvement in the store and the community. She helped establish Winnemucca's first proper library, donated a portion of the store's profits to build a new schoolhouse, and organized regular social events that brought the growing town together. Xander, watching her passionate engagement with their community, felt his love for her deepen with each passing year. The impulsive young woman who had once brought water to an exhausted railroad worker had become a pillar of Winnemucca society, respected and beloved by all. Their 10th wedding anniversary coincided with the completion of Winnemucca's first proper hotel, a project Xander had invested in alongside several other business owners. The grand opening celebration doubled as an anniversary party, with the entire town turning out to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a local legend. "Did you ever imagine this?" Hope asked as they danced beneath the hotel's crystal chandeliers, her blue silk gown swirling around them. "That night when you were working alone on the railroad, did you ever picture this life?" Xander shook his head, holding her close. "Never. I couldn't have dreamed something this perfect." He glanced around at their friends, their children dancing with their grandparents, the town prospering around them. "You gave me more than water that night, Hope. You gave me a future." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. We gave it to each other. As the years passed, Xander and Hope watched their children grow tall and strong. Samuel inherited his father's head for business and his mother's compassionate spirit. By the time he was 18, he was managing significant aspects of the family enterprises, showing a particular talent for anticipating market trends and customer needs. Elizabeth, quieter but equally determined, revealed an unexpected aptitude for medicine after helping the town doctor tend to victims of a scarlet fever outbreak when she was 16. With her parents' blessing, she eventually traveled east to attend one of the few medical schools that accepted women, determined to return to Winnemucca as its first female physician. "They're extraordinary," Xander remarked to Hope one evening as they sat on the porch of their home, no longer the small cottage of their early marriage, but a handsome two-story house that reflected their prosperity. Both of them. "They had good examples to follow," Hope replied, her hand finding his as it had countless times over their years together. At 50, Xander's dark hair was now streaked with silver, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but he remained strong and vital. Hope, approaching 48, had lost none of her spirit or determination, though she now wore spectacles for reading and moved somewhat more carefully than in her youth. When Samuel announced his engagement to Julia Hammond, the daughter of the town's banker, the celebration brought back memories of their own wedding more than 20 years earlier. "Does it make you feel old?" Hope teased Xander as they watched the young couple dancing at their engagement party. "Not old," he corrected thoughtfully. "Accomplished. We've built something lasting, Hope, not just a business or a family, but a legacy." The wedding the following spring was everything the young couple could have wished for, with Samuel and Julia pledging their love in the same church where Xander and Hope had exchanged their vows. As the father of the groom, Xander found himself unexpectedly emotional, thinking of all the years that had passed and all that was still to come. When Elizabeth completed her medical training and returned to Winnemucca, the town welcomed its first female doctor with a combination of curiosity and pride. She established her practice in a small building Xander had purchased near the town square, specializing in women's and children's health. "You've never once doubted me," she told her father gratefully as he helped her arrange her new office. "Even when everyone said it wasn't a suitable profession for a woman. I learned long ago not to underestimate determined women," Xander replied with a wink. "Your mother taught me that lesson well." The arrival of grandchildren added new joy to their lives. Samuel and Julia's twins, a boy and a girl named Alexander, and Hope after their grandparents, became the center of family gatherings. Elizabeth, to the surprise of many, found love with a widowed rancher who valued both her independence and her healing skills. Their marriage brought 3 more grandchildren into the expanding McCoy clan. As Xander approached his 60th birthday, he began to consider retirement. The businesses were thriving under Samuel's management, and he found himself yearning for more time to enjoy his family and pursue interests he had long neglected. "What would you think about traveling?" he asked Hope one evening. "Not permanently, of course, but perhaps visiting some of the places we've only read about. The Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, maybe even back east to see the Atlantic Ocean." Hope's eyes lit up with the same enthusiasm he had first fallen in love with decades ago. "I would love that, Xander. We've spent our lives building Winnemucca. Perhaps it's time to see what else the world has to offer." Their first journey, a month-long excursion to Yellowstone National Park, rekindled a sense of adventure neither had realized they'd been missing. Standing before the majestic geysers and pristine lakes, hand in hand with the woman who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness, Xander felt profoundly grateful for the path his life had taken. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't brought water to a stubborn railroad foreman that evening?" he asked Hope as they watched the sun set over the mountains. She considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I think it wasn't chance, Xander. Some things are meant to be, and we were meant to find each other. He squeezed her hand, thinking of the words that had first opened his heart to possibility. "You don't have to do it alone," she had said, offering not just water but partnership, support, and eventually, love. Upon their return to Winnemucca, they found the town preparing for its 50th anniversary celebration. As one of the oldest and most respected families, the McCoys were asked to lead the commemorative parade and speak at the ceremony. Standing before the gathered townspeople, many of whom he had known for decades, Xander felt a swell of pride in what Winnemucca had become. "When I first came here in 1869, this was little more than a stopover point on the railroad's path," he told the crowd. "But it became much more than that. It became home. And that transformation happened not because of rails or ties or spikes, but because of people who believed in building something together." He looked at Hope, seated nearby with their children and grandchildren. "I came to Winnemucca to build a railroad, but with the help of an extraordinary woman who refused to let me work alone, I found I was actually building a life, our life. And for that, I will be eternally grateful." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Xander had eyes only for Hope, whose smile still had the power to make his heart skip a beat after more than 40 years of marriage. That evening, as the celebration continued with music and dancing in the town square, Xander and Hope slipped away for a quiet moment together. They walked slowly, arm in arm, to the spot where the railroad tracks curved away from town, the same spot where he had proposed all those years ago. "It's strange to think how much has changed," Hope mused, looking out at the landscape bathed in moonlight. "And yet, when I look at you, I still see that determined young foreman working himself to exhaustion." Xander chuckled. "And I still see the headstrong young woman who wouldn't take no for an answer." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you more now than I did then, Hope, more with each passing day." "As I love you," she replied softly. "We built something beautiful together, Xander." "And we're not finished yet," he promised, drawing her close. As they stood together under the vast Nevada sky, surrounded by the life they had created through love, determination, and partnership, both knew with certainty that the greatest adventures still lay ahead, because whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything since that first evening, when she had brought water to a man working alone. Together,